I'm Lisa King, and I work in the Investment Management and Asset Performance team at the Treasury, and I'm pleased to be your host today for this portfolio management community of interest. So I'm really looking forward to our session today on lean portfolio management. Great to see keen interest in the topic. We're going to be using ACC as a case study today, which we did for our first topic as well. So I don't know if you made it to the last one, but we were myth-busting Agile. And today's session is the second in a series of sessions about Agile delivery approaches. If you did miss the first session, you can watch it on video on the PCOI website. When I send my email out to you next week with the video from today and the presentation slides, I'll also include last times as well in case you didn't get those. Feel free to invite other people to these sessions and just let me know, and we'd be delighted to add them to the distribution list. Before we get started, just a few things to let you know about if you haven't been in this building before. If there's an earthquake, drop cover and hold, preferably away from the windows. I think we're all sitting far enough back from the windows not to worry. And if the fire alarm sounds, take the nearest stairs. There's some that way, and there's some around near the tea and coffee making facilities. The bathrooms are also located in the same places. If you need to use those, please feel free to get up any time. Now, when we assemble for if there's a fire, we come straight back here. By Toombul House, there's an area of lawn there that you can stand upon. Hopefully none of those things are going to happen, but you'll be well prepared if they do. Okay, now we will be videoing the session. That's all underway right now, and we're aiming to finish about 12 p.m. If you do want to stay back and talk to the presenters or anyone else, please feel free to. The room's booked till 12:30, so you're welcome to stay a little bit longer. We'll just be busy tidying up a bit, but that's okay. Okay, so now it gives me great pleasure to welcome Russell Andrews and Suzanne, I'm going to hope I say your surname right, Himoko, who are both coming to talk to us about lean portfolio management. They're going to share the presentation. Now, Russell is an Agile transformation consultant at Frank Innovation and Transformation, and he's got over 20 years practitioner experience, and he's working with ACC at the moment to support their transformation. And Suzanne is the manager of the ACC Portfolio Management Office. She also has over 20 years practitioner experience. And like me, they both started when they were 5.
Yeah,
So welcome. I'll hand over to you both. And then at the end, we'll have a quick discussion before we go about the topic for the next meeting. Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
Thanks everyone. I'll go up first. In case you can't tell, I'm Russell. And I'm going to talk about the first two parts of this presentation. The first bit is sort of a little bit of groundwork about what is scaled agile, what is lean safe. And hi Alan, how's it going? Yeah. Sorry, got distracted here for a moment. And the second component, I'll talk a little bit about our group that is trying to implement lean agile within ACC, which is continuous delivery. And then I'll hand over to Suzanne, who'll give us a background on the lean portfolio management side of SAFE and what we're actively doing to try and implement lean portfolio management and what some of our future plans are. At the end of the first part, where I talk a little bit about the basics of scaled agile, I'll stop for questions, and then we'll continue with the rest of the session and take questions at the end. But we felt that was a good place to actually, if anybody is feeling confused or wants to understand a little bit more about the basics of SAFE, you can stop then and we can answer those questions before we move on to the more specific topics. Sound okay? Can everybody hear what I'm saying?
Give us a mic here if you need it.
It's quite loud with the aircon. How's that? Is that better?
Yeah.
Right, okay, great. I'll try and maintain this volume.
Or you could use the microphone if you like.
Or I could use the microphone, but I'm going to try and maintain this volume, but thank you. Okay, so what is SAFE, the Scaled Agile Framework, topic number 1, and lean portfolio management? What do we mean by these things? So, for those of you who have at least a passing familiarity with Agile, you'll understand the concept of Scrum and Scrum teams. So the idea of Agile at a team level is you have a team of around about 8 to 12 people, and they will have a product owner who is responsible for prioritizing the work that the team does, and you will also have a Scrum Master who is responsible for organizing the team and for taking escalated issues. What Scaled Agile tries to do is answer the question, how do you actually do that for a program? How do you do that for an organization? How do you take those concepts and apply it at scale and make sure that you're actually still aligned to your organizational goals? Because it's all very well to set teams up to work in this way, and they can be very effective, but often they can be uncoordinated. And the way that Scaled Agile tries to answer this, and I'm going to go over here so I might be able to frame you the movie, is there are 3 layers to it, and it's fractal, which means the same things sort of happen at the different layers. So at the team layer, again, you've got a team that works on stories, small bits of work that they think they can get completed in 2 weeks. They have a product owner and they have a scrum master. Above that, you collate a whole bunch of teams together with a single purpose into a group called an Agile Release Train. And the idea of the Agile Release Train is a little bit like a project or a program, but it doesn't stop. It doesn't have an end date. It just keeps going forever. So it's a persistent team in the same way that Scrum teams are persistent. And the idea is that everybody gets better and better at working together, and we're able to deliver value faster. And as a group, we align all of our activities to actually deliver value to our customers, and we try not to do those things that don't deliver value to our customers. And that's the lean bit of Lean, Safe, Agile. Right? We don't do things which actually don't deliver value to our customers, either directly or indirectly. At this level, at the program level, we don't execute in stories. The stories roll up into features. And where a story is a small piece of work that a team can execute in hopefully less than 2 weeks, a feature is something that the art can execute in hopefully what we call a program increment, which is usually between 10 to 12 weeks. And where a team might plan on a fortnightly basis, the art, the Agile Release Train, plans on a 10 to 12 week basis. And at the beginning, there's a big 2-day session called PI planning, which is very, very exciting and a little bit chaotic. And then out of that, you have a plan for the next 10 to 12 weeks, and then you rinse and repeat and see how you went, you reflect on how you've gone, and you continue onwards. So you're doing the same sort of activities at different levels. And then you keep doing that forever, but above that, how do you make sure it's aligned to your strategy? How do you make sure that you're actually meeting your longer term goals? So you have this concept of epics. And an epic is something which takes longer than a quarter to execute. It's almost like a little mini project in and of itself, but you don't stand up a team to do it, you assign it to an existing art, right? So you don't stand up a program to execute a project or to execute scope. You take the scope and you give it to one of your existing release trains. And the epics themselves, they have things like leading indicators to make sure that you are actually able to track whether you're really going to get the benefit that you expect out of the work that you're anticipating. It has a hypothesis which says, we observe this problem or this opportunity, and we think that if we do this, we will get this outcome. And you track that hypothesis, and if you find your hypothesis is wrong, you drop that epic and you do something else of more value. So you're constantly revising your priorities and updating them. Does that make sense? Yeah. So sort of the same sort of activities at every level. And you might do things at the portfolio level, say once or twice a year. And along with that, and I'll go into a little bit more detail about what happens at the portfolio level, because that's what we're going to talk about today. You do things like budgeting and allocating work out and working out where the efforts belong. That was slide 1. Right. Slide 2. This is taken out of the top diagram is taken straight out of the sort of the Safe 101 pack, and it's pretty standard safe terminology. But this is the layer at which we do our portfolio management, right? So it sits above the Agile Release Train, which is analogous to a program. And it's the activities that you do to make sure that everything is really, really coordinated with your strategy. So you can see I talked before about the epics that you've got. And epics come in 2 types. So there's an epic and an enabler. An epic is something that actually adds value to your customer, whoever your customer may be, and you need to understand who your customer is. And an enabler is something that doesn't, but it helps you do something later on will add value to your customer, right? So standing up a big piece of infrastructure, your customers won't care about that usually, unless they're really excited by infrastructure. But you need to do it in order to deliver value later on. Right? So those 2 types. Now underneath that, you'll see there's something called value streams. And a value stream is a concept of understanding what are the things that your organization does that actually add value to your customer. So in a commercial organisation, often those align to products that give you revenue. In a government organisation, it often aligns to specific services that you provide to the community. At ACC, we're still in the process of identifying our value streams, but if we don't understand what those value streams are, we can't streamline those activities, and we can't align our release trains to the delivery of value, right? So, and that's an ongoing evolutionary process. So it's important to understand your customer, so you understand the value that you're delivering, so you can focus on delivering that value and you can prioritize your epics accordingly, right? And not do things that don't actually add value to customers. Now beyond that, you have a backlog, right? So you can't do everything at once. And this is a danger that a lot of organisations fall into, and ACC is as bad as any really, which is that we conflate the availability of money with the capacity to actually do things, right? So we can't throw $5 million, $10 million at a problem and expect it to be resolved. That money has to actually translate to people who are working on the problem. And often it's very hard to find those people. They get pulled from existing projects. An organisation cannot do too many things at once, and you need to have a sense of how many things you can actually do. And so in Agile, there's the concept of Kanban. Is anybody not familiar with Kanban? So it's just a board which has various states of work. And so here you'd say, at the simplest level, you'd say, here are some epics that we think are good ideas. Here's some epics we've actually dug into and we're certain they're good ideas. Here are the epics that we're actually executing, and here are the epics that are done, right? That would be a really simplistic view. But there's only so many you can do at any given time, and the organisation needs to have a view of that. And part of the role at the portfolio level is actually making the decisions about what are we going to do, but also making the decisions, what are we not going to do, right? Because if we do too many things at once, we won't finish them, and therefore we won't deliver value to our customers, right? We have 80 projects on the go at once, we won't finish any of them, because we're doing thin little streams of work. We want to go all in on one thing ideally, or two or three or four or five things, and get it done, and then move on to the next thing, and move on to the next thing. That's the principle. And all this mechanism is designed to help you do that. I'll talk a little bit about lean budgets and guardrails. So the idea is that if you've identified value streams and you understand what actually is valuable to your customer, and again in a commercial organisation, it's revenue streams really, often related to a product. But in a government organisation, there may not be any revenue associated with it. It's a service that you provide. You need to understand how much money you need to put in that to actually get that value out. And there might be situations where you want to expand that bandwidth or narrow the bandwidth, but you want to keep it roughly the same, because rapidly ramping up bandwidth and rapidly ramping down bandwidth contains with it a number of problems, which is there's lead times and it creates chaos, it creates instability within the teams. If you bring more people on board, often it slows down the delivery because you spend more time onboarding and hand-holding new people. It creates chaos. So you want to be able to expand slowly and contract slowly and bring the money to where it's actually bringing you value. You might have a value stream that you want to slowly wind down. You might have a new value stream, something new that you want to do that you want to slowly ramp up. And the budgeting and portfolio process is part of the way that you do that. And ideally, it's sort of recommend you do that maybe twice a year, once or twice a year, right? So you're doing these slow tweaks to the budgeting, expanding and narrowing your value streams. And that way you can get more work, less work done. And then the bottom diagram is just a little discussion about the differences between traditional approaches and the lean agile approach. So a key thing is decentralization. So scaled agile is very, very big on decentralization because it makes things go faster. Right? If you're not waiting for a decision, you can actually make a decision and move on. Right? The question is, how do you de-risk those decisions, but also how do you, if you're decentralizing decision making, how do you make sure everybody is aligned? And that's where the concept of guardrails comes in, which is that you set some broad perspectives and you say, okay, you can play within this area, you make the decisions here, but don't go outside this. If you go outside this, come and talk to us at the portfolio level. Right? If you want to stand up a new value stream, it has to go up to the portfolio level. If you want to do an epic which is outside the priority that we've set, come and talk to us, that's outside. But within that, great, go for it. You make the decisions around that. So it tries to find a balance between aligning all the work to our strategic goals versus decentralizing so that people can move fast and aren't held up. We don't want to overload projects, so we throttle the work according to our capacity. And a lot of what happens in Scaled Agile is trying to understand what is our true ability to actually ingest and complete work, right? And over time, we get a sense about how much work can we really get done, and then you only ingest that work. And then you have to make the hard decisions about what you do and you don't do, but you're making realistic decisions about what you're trying to do. You don't try and bite off too much, and you don't put people under pressure, too much pressure anyway. It has to be sustainable pressure. Because a release train, unlike a project, exists essentially forever or for a very long time, you can't have peaks and troughs. You have to really, really have a continual, sustainable workload right? Otherwise people get burned out and they can't keep going like that. Instead of detailed project plans at the epic level, we really have a lean business case where we say, well, we think this is what the problem is, we think this is what the hypothesis is, we actually don't know how much it's going to cost, but we have a rough idea that it's roughly this big. We're going to get started and we're going to test our hypothesis in the quickest way we can. Right? That's a big challenge often for organisations, but what we try and do is try and de-risk that by saying we're actually checking along the way. We don't actually commit at any point to completing the epic. We say we're going to start the epic, we commit to 3-month pieces of work, but if we find at the end of that 3 months it's not the right thing to do or we're not making progress, we reassess and we pivot without mercy. Right? So it's not like a project or a program where you commit to maybe 2 years or 3 years or maybe you commit to 1 year, but it turns out being 2 or 3 years. And you don't have the illusion of accuracy where you try and present a lot of detail when you really don't have a lot of detail. Right? You sort of confront the fact that you don't know a lot of things head on, and you try and represent that in the level of documentation that you do. Excuse me. We don't do work breakdown structure, but we do have that 3-tier hierarchy between the epic and the feature and the story. We don't do project-based funding, so we fund value streams. So we say, okay, here's X million dollars for this value stream, and we feed work into it. We don't look at the total number of work and say, okay, therefore we need this amount of dollars. Right? One of the consequences of that is that your budgeting year on year is going to be relatively stable because you're saying, well, we know exactly what we're going to spend. We don't know what we're going to deliver, but we know exactly what we're going to spend. Right? So you're sort of anchoring different points of stability on the iron triangle than you would in a standard waterfall program. And the last one, we don't have waterfall milestones, right? So we don't care if we've written requirements documentation, right? It's not a meaningful measure of where we're actually at. We measure our progress through working stuff, right? And the classic phrase in Agile is working software. It's not necessarily software. So for example, in CD, we're running as an Agile release train ourselves. We don't deliver software, we deliver change, right? So anything that we've actually implemented into the organisation, that's working stuff from our perspective. And we track our project by stuff that we've actually done at the story level and at the feature level and at the epic level. Right. Whew, it's been a long time on that slide as well. So some key concepts. I think I've already talked about most of these. So lean budgeting, really the idea there is to enable people to make their own decisions so that people can move fast. Right? If you decentralize decision making, they don't have to wait a month for a decision. Right? They can make a decision now and move forward. The key to that is de-risking that. How do you make sure everybody's aligned? Value streams. Okay, a series of steps that helps deliver value. We really need to understand where we live in the value stream because that helps us understand what we deliver that is a value to our customer and it helps us understand our customer. And it helps us strip away all those activities that we should not be doing because it doesn't help our customer. Right? All that ridiculous stuff that we do day in, day out. Portfolio Kanban, a key role of the executive in the portfolio level in Scaled Agile is prioritising the work. If the work is prioritised at the epic level, then everybody underneath that knows what's important and what's not. They may not be able to follow that priority. There may be certain things they need to do, or they may not have the capability to deliver some high priority items, but they'll understand that priority and they'll try and follow it as much as possible. And again, by having those clear priorities, you're able to decentralize decision making. People go, okay, I know what you want, right, I'm going to do my best to execute it, and then reflect back up, here's how we do it. The portfolio canvas, I've talked about the epic, but the portfolio canvas is basically just a description of the portfolio itself. So it talks about what the funding is, funding sources are, it talks about how you're actually going to deliver the portfolio, are there external vendors, what are the teams, what are the value streams that belong to them, and what binds the whole portfolio together. A lot of organisations, particularly in a country the size of New Zealand, will probably have one portfolio. Some may have more, right? And very large organisations such as Boeing, which use SAFe, they may have many portfolios around different categories of products. Okay, so let me stop there. We've got a bit of time. Cool. Are there any questions about any of that before I move on?
Where's the linkage to the organisational strategy kick in?
Yep, great question. So if we go back to here, up the top here, which I haven't actually put there, There is a strategic goals and strategic visions, and there's also a concept of a postcard from the future, which is basically say, okay, here's where we want to be. I'm sending a postcard back in time to where we are. This is what it looks like. And you may have KPIs, and you may have descriptors of where you want to be. You may have a roadmap, and then you align your epics to those strategic goals.
Is that through the canvas level or straight to the epics?
Straight to the epics. So the portfolio canvas will probably have some statement about how the portfolio itself is going to execute those goals, but the canvas itself is not a really, really deep document. The epic descriptions themselves will have to make some reference to how they're going to help you achieve your strategic goals. Yeah. Good question. Any more questions? Yeah.
Do you have examples of what your ones look like?
Sorry, what was that?
Do you have examples of the ones that you have looked like?
The portfolio canvas. Do we have a portfolio canvas?
Not yet.
No.
So we're going to head into the next section of the presentation is talking about where we're at from an ACC perspective of what we have and don't have yet. So it's coming, I'll let you know, but
Yeah.
no.
Yeah. So we're working our transformation from the bottom up. We're standing up projects as arts, and we're trying to work out what that portfolio layer looks like for us. Yeah. Great question. Is there another? Oh, two more. Yes.
I think you just answered the question, but I'll just check, and I probably should know the answer anyway. When ACC decided to go scale agile lean portfolio,
Yes.
is it a bottom-up type development or is it a top-down? So did you put in a change program to make this happen in your organisation?
Yes. So that's the entire next section I'm going to talk about. So
Right.
yes, we did put in a change program to make it happen, and we're running that as an art ourselves. But we're also taking a bottom-up approach. So we're not trying to go big bang and say, okay, when you come on Monday, the world's going to be completely different. We've started by transforming some existing projects and programs into release trains, and we're trying to learn from that, right? Because we don't have all the answers, we don't know how it's going to work, we know we're going to make mistakes along the way, so we're trying it, experimenting. It'll probably take 6 to 9 months with our first wave, and then we may roll into a second wave of projects and programs that we transform. And all the while, we will identify the problems and the obstacles that we've got and try and resolve those within the organisation, and also build up the portfolio layer, right? and work our way up. And work out how that's going to work overall. And one of the challenges that we've got is that we will almost certainly end up with a multimodal endpoint where we'll still have some waterfall projects because we think that's actually useful to do in certain situations. Right? So how does that multimodal work? Right? So we need to design that ourselves.
You do realise I'll never be able to look at a sushi train again.
What's that?
I'll never be able to look at a sushi train again without thinking about the ACC.
Yeah, it's like a sushi train. It doesn't stop and it brings you delicious value. Yeah, exactly right. I'm stealing that. That's great. Sorry, you had a question? Yeah.
Yeah, I think you mentioned briefly about doing less, not doing a lot of things at the same time.
Yes.
And it is quite a big change. And how did you manage that through the senior stakeholders in the organization?
We have not yet addressed that fully, right? So we're still building up the portfolio layer. When we get to the portfolio layer and we're able to talk about the things that we can and can't do, right, then we will have that conversation. And we expect it to be a very challenging conversation because generally speaking, the expectation is that we can throw money at a problem, we can make it go away. Or at least have the illusion that it's underway, right? What we want to do is finish things. Sorry, do you have a question?
So you talk about that bottom up.
Yep.
So where is that sweet spot with if you've still got traditional governance and funding models
Yes.
at the top and bottom up? Because those things can mismatch quite a lot. You know, around the funding of the arts and the value
Yep.
streams versus the traditional governance and funding of the epics and
That is an excellent question, but I think I will defer to Suzanne to answer that question because that really is, she's been at the front line of that, and I think she'll address that as part of her talk. If you don't mind.
If I don't, remind me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it reminds us at the end if we don't address that. Hi.
Hey, we're talking about developing, creating value for your customer.
Yeah.
At what point do you and how do you figure out what that value is if it's a customer?
Yeah, it's a really, really good question. You need to validate with your customers in a number of ways. So first of all, you need to be talking and engaging with your customers. There are various ceremonies within Scaled Agile, which are a lot like some of the Scrum ceremonies, but on a larger scale. So I talked about PR planning. It is a very good idea to have your customers, if you can, in a controlled way, come and participate in your planning so that you're prioritizing the right things. When you're identifying epics, it is a very good idea to actually be talking to your customers and understanding what their problems are, and you hypothesize about what the solution to that problem is, and then validate that with them. The best way to validate something with your customer is to get something out there and try it, right? Because we will get things wrong. We will think things are great. We don't want to spend 2 years thinking this is the solution to a customer's problem and find out that we're wrong. We want to spend maybe a month, or 2 months at most, hypothesizing and testing that hypothesis and finding out we're on the wrong track. We will find out we're on the right track, but getting stuff actually out there and used by the customers is the best way. And the other main ceremony is there is a retrospective at the end of the PI, at the end of 10 to 12 weeks, where you demonstrate everything you've done as a release train over that 10 to 12 weeks, and you really want your customers there, right? You want them to actually be represented so that you understand what they're doing. And one other key thing, and this is just true of Agile as a whole, is the concept of Gemba, where you actually go and where your customers are and see how they're using whatever you're doing, right? Whether it's a product or a service, but really just go there and understand how they're using it, right? Without that, you won't really understand your customer. So, but it's a very tricky thing, right? And it's very hard, and often we fall prey to the idea that we actually know best. And sometimes we do, and sometimes we don't. We need to test that we know best. That makes sense. I think I better move on, because I sense we're probably running out of time.
Thank you.
Thank you. So continuous delivery. So as I said, we're a group that's been stood up to actually drive this change through our ACC. So our goal is, really the problem we're trying to identify is that we feel that we actually don't respond quickly to the needs of our customers. We sense a gap between the activities they're actually doing in the portfolio and our strategic vision. And I think that gap is sort of represented a lot of metrics that we're gathering. So there's a sense that while we're doing a lot of stuff, it doesn't necessarily translate into the execution of our strategy. And there's sort of this grey mist between the two, and we're trying to draw a clear line between them. And we want to be open and transparent, but the bottom one is probably the key thing, which is that we want to get better and get better at getting better, right? So we want to continually improve, we want to reflect, we want a mechanism that actually helps us do that, right? We don't want to just reach a plateau, we want to keep getting better and better and better at achieving our goals, right? And we think that SAFE helps us do that. So we have 3 elements to this, so one of which is we have a strategy, and we're continually updating our strategy, right? So we don't just set a strategy and then walk away from it. We're continually revisiting and updating that strategy and making sure that it's still fit for purpose. Right? We want to be continually updating our culture, have a culture of reflection, of improvement, updating the way that we're doing and making sure that it's aligned to our customers' needs. And who are our customers? We want to have continuous delivery. We want to be continually working and deploying value out to our customers. And in the centre, you can see who are our customers. Our ACC has, and I'm horribly simplifying here, but three main groups of customers. It has people who pay levies. It has people who have had accidents, either minor or very serious accidents, and also people who haven't had accidents are actually our customers. Right? So that pretty much covers everybody in New Zealand. Everybody in New Zealand is our customer to some degree or other. And we need to be aware of that, and we need to be trying to deliver value to them. And often they won't even notice that we're delivering value, because if they don't have an accident, and it's through our efforts, then that's really good. And they don't know about it, but that's really positive. Okay, I'll hand over to Sandra. Thank you very much.
Right, let's flip to the right page. Okay, so hi everybody. So
You may like to use the microphone.
I don't really. Can you, back row, can you wave at me if you can't hear me? And look, I will use the mic if I have to, but you let me know. Can you hear me? Okay. So so I've been on the continuous delivery change program now for 4 months. So I think it's 4. Feels like maybe slightly longer, but I think it's 4. So it's not that long, and I've stepped out of my BAU role as managing the portfolio office for ACC to be part of this change program. And so there's a couple of things from a personal perspective. One is how nice it is to step out of BAU, right? So I don't know, are there any PMO managers in the room? Yeah, so you'll know how nice it is to step out of BAU. And no offence to some of my team members that might be here today. The second is what an amazing opportunity, right? What an amazing opportunity to explore scaled agile and what it might do to help ACC. What an amazing opportunity personally to learn about something new, to be part of a team that's kind of entrusted with designing what's right for ACC and testing and trying it. So I'm kind of really quite thankful to be part of that. At some point I'll have to go back, I suppose. Never mind. So the section I'm going to talk about is really ACC focused. So Russell started with the vision, etc. for CD. I'm going to talk about actually how does portfolio management look like today in ACC, and where are we at with lean portfolio management from a safe perspective. So our current state, and I got fancy with animation here, so things are going to build if I've done it right. So today we have ACC strategy. That's pretty clear for us. That's an enterprise strategy. Essentially three things, right? Injury prevention. So, all of our customers being New Zealand. So, really key thing about reducing the seriousness of injury and reducing the frequency of delivery. Secondly, customer outcomes and experience, so that when people do have an accident, that their outcome is better, so they return to independence quicker and in a fuller way. And secondly, that their experience in working with or dealing with ACC on that journey is a good one, as good as it possibly can be. The third area of the strategy is that the ACC scheme is financially sustainable. And I think we're so lucky, aren't we, in New Zealand to have a scheme like ACC. There's nothing equivalent, as far as I'm aware, in the world, where no matter whether you're an absolute idiot and it's your own fault that you had an accident, and as New Zealanders we do things a lot, including myself, broken hand from scooters I shouldn't be riding, but it doesn't matter, no fault, no blame, you're covered. It's a unique thing, so making sure our scheme is sustainable is a really key thing in our strategy. So that's enterprise level, and at that enterprise level there's a number of KPIs and targets that are associated with achieving that strategy. From an investment portfolio perspective, we have a subset of those targets that directly relate to our investment portfolio or our change portfolio. So they're our benefit targets. We also have lots of customer feedback, and we've got some quite mature, I think, based on recent tools that's gone in place, mechanisms to get this feedback from our customers, and we have a dedicated customer insight team that takes those and looks at what our customers are telling us, what are the themes, should we prioritise that's important to make a difference. And then I think this might be familiar to a lot of other organisations too, and in fact I know it is for some that I've worked in. On an annual basis, there is a business planning process. So on an annual basis, individual business groups put together their plans for the following year. And on an annual basis, and for us kind of between November and February, March-ish, we take those individual business group plans and we prioritise what the portfolio will focus on. So that's really a kind of a bid kind of process and a prioritisation exercise that's always very challenging with senior leaders in the organisation. Today we fund the portfolio, sorry, not we fund the portfolio, but when you look at the portfolio from a funding perspective, there's individual lines relating to predominantly running projects. So that's how our portfolio budget is set up today. And today, obviously, our metrics, so how we're performing and delivering the portfolio, is predominantly based on project type metrics. So, you know, the usual cost, time, scope, benefits realisation, and our guardrails or guidelines are based on the usual project things like tolerances, change control, risk escalation, etc. So a simplistic view of kind of ACC's portfolio strategy and investment approach today. So we've got some opportunities, right? And so regardless of scaled agile, we have opportunities always, right, to do things better. I think the difference is scaled agile, and what Russell talked about, there's some tools and techniques up at that portfolio layer that look really interesting. And so we've got some opportunities to explore those. So this talks about not really where we're applying the tools or thinking of applying the tools, but more about where our opportunity areas are. So we have what I refer to, so this is a Suzanne term, of an air gap between our enterprise ACC strategy and the individual business group plans that get developed each year. So it's quite an air gap between those two things. And again, I don't think this is uncommon. I think this is not necessarily just an ACC thing. We've got these, as I said, we've actually got awesome customer insight. But as we move to incremental delivery, we need to feed that pipeline. We need to feed that pipeline on a quarterly 10 to 12 week cadence. And therefore we need to be able to really translate that feedback into tangible items to feed delivery that make a difference to our customers. So there's some opportunities there to do that a little bit differently. We talked about portfolio canvas, or Russell chatted about portfolio canvas, and I think someone asked a question. So today it kind of feels like our portfolio vision is almost like a bottom-up thing. Because of this annual individual business group planning and the prioritisation process, the focus for our portfolio ends up being what's prioritised, and it's kind of okay, but we've got an opportunity to kind of close that air gap and take a more of a top-down approach, look at our really key KPIs and what we want to chase hard, make sure we're not doing too much, that would be nice. And so we've got an opportunity to be a lot clearer about the focus and vision for our portfolio. Increase integration. So this kind of, I guess, is a nice way of saying breaking down business unit silos, right? So lines of business are fine, but again, coming back to some of Russell's stuff, so if you think those value streams, well, they cut across those business group silos, don't they? In most organisations, they cut across. So how can we increase that integration and get more of a customer focus than a business group line focus? Reduce cost risk. 20 mumble years, both of us in the industry, as portfolio program project folk over the years. And we all know that there's a lot of cost risk with projects. There's a lot of risk generally, but there's a lot of cost risk that no one has a crystal ball. So when you estimate a project, it's never going to be right. And many of us have lots of scars around that. I guess this opportunity. So I suppose over the years we've taught ourselves, and we've got quite good. Talking for myself perhaps, but no, I think we've got quite good at managing the cost risk and reducing and mitigating it, but there's an overhead to that, right? There's a real overhead. So if you reduce that cost risk by funding value streams, then the conversation moves from cost to value. And that conversation shift from cost to value is really where the gold is, I think. And we've got opportunity. I mean, it's not really opportunity, we have to do this. Today our metrics aren't set up for Agile. Our decision authorities aren't set up for Agile. They don't support decentralised decision making. So we have to do that. We have to empower and enable the teams to change. And so some of the guidelines and guardrails we put in place need to consider that. So that was a really brief overview of current state, where we see the opportunities, and now we're going to look at specifically what our roadmap is. So I suppose there's just a context thing here, and Russell did touch on this. Continuous delivery as an art or a change program has, in ACC, has a number of epics, those big things, to achieve. Lean portfolio management is just one of those epics. If you were to look at the SAFE's got a really good website, by the way, really easy to read, digest, navigate, so get into it, it's cool. But if you were to look at SAFE and look at the implementation roadmap for SAFE, basically what it says is train your leaders, so build the knowledge, train your leaders, get your champions in the organisation and kind of train. Trials, setting up agile teams, agile release trains, test, learn, do a few more, test, learn. Then when you're starting to build a bit of maturity, start to look at portfolio management. So that's what kind of the SAFE roadmap looks like. I hope I got that right.
That's good.
Okay. So bearing that in mind, we're early, right? We're really early. 4 months we've been running, roughly. We've stood up four or five if you count CD, because we're drinking our own champagne by running our change program in the same way. We've got 5 pilots of agile release trains. So that's a lot in 4 months. So we're really early on this portfolio management stuff. It's only just kind of started for us. But for this epic, we've identified these 8 features. These will change, right? That's just part of it. They're essentially what I would call discovery features. They're about, look at what SAFE offers us, see how that applies to ACC, will it work in our environment, will it add some value for us? If so, let's give something a whirl and change it as we go. So this PI we're in, which end of September it finishes, and the next one, which essentially goes through to Christmas, we're focusing on 2 main areas. One is value streams, so that's understanding what ACC's value streams look like and determining how we might want to go forward from there. Secondly, this transparency and metrics. This is really looking at, actually we've got these pilots up and running, what are the key performance indicators, or the performance indicators? Yeah, probably the key performance indicators that are the right things to look at to know how we're going with these pilots, and how do we surface that transparently through the organisation. So that's our focus at the moment. And you'll see some backlog stuff there, which really ties back to some of those tools and techniques in SAFE. So portfolio strategy, the canvas, how we run governance, decentralised decision making, guardrails, the Kanban, how we do the work in progress and see how the epics are flowing. So we haven't got to those yet. And each PI planning, we are adjusting and working out where we focus. So as I say, keep coming back to you, we're early, we're learning. There's a real opportunity to do things differently. Where we end up will look different than this from a roadmap perspective. So our next slide is questions. So that's kind of, without Lisa doing the wrap up, that's kind of the end of the formal presentation. Before I open it up, if anyone, of course, hang around later and ask questions, but also if you just want to reach out after this, both Russell and I are really open to just come knocking on the door. So happy to chat at any time.
Thank you.
Any questions? And I'll get Russell back up.
Second one?
Yeah, that'll be great. Oh, did I? We'll come back and see if I answered the question before. Sorry. Yeah.
I'm just interested in your portfolio target benefits part there, and how do you manage the tension between different projects? Are they quite stable over time, and or are they dynamic, dependent on the interaction between different projects in the portfolio?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
I'm not sure I understand either. Can I try again?
So you might have a benefit target for the entire portfolio.
Yeah.
Have you seen it change over time depending on the dynamics between different projects? So a decision might be made around a change of scope or
Yeah, right.
budget or
Yeah,
other inputs into various projects.
yeah,
Or have you been able to say fix it, that's it, we're going to go for it no matter what,
yeah,
and pull in the resources necessary?
yeah. So I'll try and answer that. So our benefit targets are relatively, they're very clear, and they're actually profiled out to 2030. Slightly mad, I think, but anyway, they are. And as you would expect over time, the initiatives we think that are going to drive those benefits, their level of contribution to those benefits change over time as we learn more as they implement. We do review our targets each year as part of our service agreement.